All right, this video is to help you review to retake the factoring test. So you should have this review in front of you. What I've done is I've gone through and I've selected a few problems that I think will help you finish this review on your own. So if you're struggling with any part of this review, this will help. All right, I'm going to jump all the way to number 3. 1 and 2 I think you can do, especially after we've done this number 3. Number 3 says factor a monomial. Okay, this is where we're going to end up, where we take the GCF and we put it outside of a set of parentheses, and then we look and see what's left over inside the set of parentheses. Okay, what you're doing on these problems before is all you're doing is finding the GCF. You just need to find what would go outside the set of parentheses. So this problem we have to do a little bit more. All right, so I'm looking for what is the biggest number that goes into 8 and also goes into 12. If you struggle with this a lot, you need to take the smaller number, 8, and think of all the factor pairs, 1 and 8, 2 and 4, and then that's really it. Those are the only numbers that go into 8. So then we can just test these numbers into 12 and see which one is the biggest number that goes also into 12. 8 does not go into 12 nicely. 4, however, does go into 12 nicely. So 4 is part of my greatest common factor. Then I have x to the third power and I have x. Since they both have x's, I know I will have x as part of my greatest common factor. The question is, which one of these do I take? I should always pick the one with the smaller exponent. So I have x to the third and x basically to the 1 power, so I should take x to the 1 power. It has the smaller exponent. Now I'm going to start my set of parentheses, and I'm going to divide to figure out what goes inside the parentheses. And since I have 2 terms here, I know I'm going to have 2 terms inside the parentheses. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, and I had x to the third power, and I took out x to the 1 power, so I have x squared. I have 2 x's still left over, so x squared left. All right, so that's the first term. Now we need to look at the second term. 12 divided by 4 is positive 3, so plus 3. I had an x, I took out x, so I don't need any more x's to make this complete. It is complete just with the 3. All right, and that's all we do on this problem. We don't have to do anything more. We're not solving for x or doing anything like that. We're just factoring out the GCF. All right, when you're doing factor by grouping, I'm not going to work through a whole problem here, but basically you're just doing that same process, but you do it twice, okay? You do it here, and then you do it here, okay? And we'll actually look at that down here when we do marfing, because factor by grouping is the last step of marfing. All right, so let's look at number 8, which is a marf problem. All right, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. All right, so on number 8, we're going to walk through our marf steps. Hopefully you're in the habit of going ahead and writing down MARF so that you don't forget what to do and you remember every single step. All right, when we multiply, we take the very front number, multiply it by the very back number. So 5 times 2. 5 times 2, which is 10. All right, and we add to be the middle number, so we put a little 7 right underneath that. And then what we're looking for is we're looking for our magic numbers. We're looking for 2 numbers that multiply together to be 10 and add together to be 7. And sometimes we struggle with that a little bit. So what I want you to do if you struggle is to take the M number, this multiply number, and list all the factor pairs. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and that's it for 10. Okay, sometimes there's a lot more than that, but 10 only has a couple of factor pairs. Well, 1 plus 10 is not 7, but 2 plus 5 is 7. So 2 and 5, they multiply together to be 10, and they add together to be 7. Okay? When we restate our problem, we take the same beginning part of our problem, 5x squared, okay? And then we use our magic numbers for the middle part. Instead of 7x, we're going to put in plus 2x plus 5x. And we're using x's because this middle term had an x on it. Then at the very end, we still have the same end to our problem, plus 2. All right? This problem's a little bit weird when we look at it because watch what's going to happen. I'm going to now do my factoring, and I'm going to factor a GCF out of each of these chunks. So I grouped up the first 2, I grouped up the last 2, and this is how you do factor by grouping if you're not sure. I'm looking for the greatest common factor of 5 and 2. Well, the biggest number that goes into 5 and goes into 2 is actually a 1. But I see this one has an x squared, and this one has an x, and I need to take the one with the smaller exponent, x. All right, now I start my set of parentheses, and I do my division. 5 divided by 1 is 5. X squared, and I took out x to the 1 power. I need another x to make that complete. Okay, now I look at the next term. 2 divided by 1 is positive 2. I had an x, I took out an x, so I don't need any more. Okay, here again, I happen to have the same numbers here. It won't always be like this, but I happen to have the same numbers, 5 and 2. So I know that the biggest number that goes into 5 and goes into 2 is a positive 1. Okay? This one has an x, but this one doesn't, so I can't take an x out. So I'm going to go ahead and start my parentheses there. All I can factor out is a 1. All right, 5 divided by 1 is 5. I had an x, and I didn't take out any x's, so I do still need that x. All right, here's a 2 divided by 1 is positive 2. There was no x here, and I didn't take out an x, so I don't need anything else there. It's really important at this point that your two sets of parentheses here match exactly, 5x plus 2 and 5x plus 2. All right, so for our very last step, what we do is we take what's outside the parentheses here, 1x, and we put it together with what's outside the parentheses here, plus 1. All right, and then next to it, we put our set of parentheses that match, 5x plus 2. Okay, and that's how we MARF. We just go through each step one by one. We don't solve for x in this chapter. All we're doing is factoring. All right, on the back page, you've got some problems that are a little more complex. I'm going to show you just a couple of these tricky problems. These might be problems that if you're really looking to get an A or a B on this test, that you would definitely want to know how to do all of them, but I just want to show you a couple of the trickier problems. This one, x squared minus 25, this is the one that it looks almost like a MARF problem. It has the x squared and it has the number at the end, but it's missing that x term in the middle. Okay, this is where we can put 0x into the middle of the problem, and then we can go ahead and MARF. So we're looking for numbers that multiply 1 times negative 5, multiply to be negative 25, and add to be 0. Okay, and in this situation, your numbers are always going to come out to be opposites, like 5 and negative 5. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, but 5 plus negative 5 is 0. Okay, and then you can walk through your whole process here. Okay, and I wouldn't worry about these problems until you definitely are good at the problems on the other side of the page. So I'm going to restate my middle terms with my magic numbers, okay, and then I'm going to do my factor by grouping. Okay, so the biggest part of this is realizing when you can put that 0x in the middle. So here I can factor out an x. I'm left with x plus 5 on this one, and I know I'm going through this one a little bit faster, but again, these are more complex problems. I'm going to factor out a negative 5 because this is a negative here in the middle. Okay, and so I'm left with x plus 5. My two sets of parentheses match. So my final answer is the stuff outside the parentheses, x minus 5, times my matching pair, which is x plus 5. Okay, so put 0x in the middle, and then you can factor. All right, we're also going to look at number 12 over here. Number 12 is weird because we have an x to the 4th power and an x squared instead of x squared and just x. So when we go through these problems, okay, we're still going to do our MARF steps, all right? What I see is I can multiply 3 times negative 10, so that's negative 30. I add to be 13, okay, so I need to think about my numbers. I'm going to think about the things that multiply to be 30. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Okay, so those are my factor pairs. So I'm looking for things that make 13. Honestly, the very first thing we usually think about is 3 and 10. 3 times 10 is 30, though, not negative 30. So they're not going to work for us right here. 3 and 10 is actually, this one's kind of tricky because the numbers are actually kind of tricky to find. And then we also have this x to the 4th and x squared. The numbers we actually need are going to be 2 and 15, but it's going to be negative 2 and positive 15. And you always want to double check your numbers. Negative times a positive makes it negative 30, and then negative 2 plus 15 makes it positive 13. So you always want to double check which number that negative needs to go on. All right, now I'm going to go and do my steps again. So 3x to the 4th power to start. Now, though, when I plug these numbers in for that middle term, I'm not just going to put x on them. I'm going to put x squared because that's what is here in the middle is x squared. Okay, so that's what makes the difference here. All right, and this work over here is kind of in my way. All right, so now I'm going to do my factor by grouping. Make sure you put x squared on both of those middle terms when you replaced them. Here, the biggest number that goes into 3 and 2 is 1, and I can take out a whole x squared here because that's the smaller exponent. I'm left with 3x squared minus 2. All right, and then here, the biggest number that goes into 15 and 10 is positive 5. This has an x squared, but this doesn't have any x's at all, so I can't take any x's out. So I'm left with 3x squared minus 2, and notice my two sets of parentheses match exactly again. So I get 1x squared plus 5 times 3x squared minus 2. Okay, and that's my final answer. So this is just when we have x to the fourth and x squared. Kind of turns out a little bit weird there. All right. Again, these problems on the back are definitely type 2s. The last two down here at the very bottom are type 3s. These are problems you might want to go over with a teacher before you take the test if you're really wanting to get the best grade possible for the test.